Rise and shine, Mr. Freeman. Rise and shine. Not that I wish to imply you have been sleeping on the job. No one is more deserving of a rest, and all the effort in the world would have gone to waste until... well, let's just say your hour has come again. The right man in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world. So wake up, Mr. Freeman. Wake up and smell the ashes.
I didn't see you get on. No matter how many times I've been relocated, I never get used to it.
I'm Gabe Newell, and welcome back to Half-Life 2. It's been a long 20 years since its release. In this anniversary update, we've tried to respond to as many of the community's requests as possible. And while this might not be the absolute #1 request from fans, I often hear how much people would like a commentary mode, so we're excited to finally make that happen. Not only was it a challenge to remember many of the details of Half-Life 2's development, but it's not easy to crack open decades-old computer code and wonder what the hell you were thinking way back then. Along with the dev commentary, we've cleaned up a bunch of old bugs and tried to leave things in better shape than we found them. And at least this time, we had the luxury of knowing how things turned out in the end. To listen to a commentary node, put your crosshair over the floating commentary symbol and press your use key. To stop a commentary node, put your crosshair over the rotating node and press the use key again. And please, let me know what you think. You can reach me at gaben@valvesoftware.com. Thanks, and have fun.
Physics objects. It might be hard to remember it now, but back when Half-Life 2 came out, small objects in games, like these bits of trash, were usually static. As in, they didn't really move, or if they did, it was in a very simple way. If you were lucky, they might break apart into some sprites if you hit them. One of the goals for this initial train station section was to really make it clear to players that these kinds of things were properly, physically, actually being simulated in Half-Life 2. They could be picked up, dropped, thrown, broken, moved by other forces, you name it. Here we're starting with just a small thing, showing that trash is being blown by the arrival of the train, or, more specifically, an invisible volume that's triggered by the player leaving the train.
Welcome. Train station. The beginning of a Half-Life game has a big job to do. We have to introduce players to a new world while teaching them how to interact with it. Players need to quickly grasp what's happening, who the key players are, what threats they face, and how they fit into it all. Above all else, it has to be as fun and interactive as possible. Nailing this takes a lot of iteration and playtesting, especially on the small moments that make up a bigger picture of the game. In this section, we'll highlight some key moments, game design problems, and a few playtests where things didn't quite go as planned.
Welcome to City 17. You have chosen, or been chosen, to relocate to one of our finest...
Metro Cop shoving citizens. We've only walked a few feet and we're already got problems to solve. We're introducing the Metro Cop, an enemy that eventually we're going to ask players to kill, and giving you a glimpse of the world they're stepping into. It's a simple, clear moment that shows the relationships between the Metro Cops and citizens, and by extension, the player. At the same time, we decided to reinforce the existence of the core physics simulation, showing the way in which NPCs can casually interact with objects in the world. Seeing something like a suitcase knock into another and dislodge was pretty novel back then. These moments at the train station, where we combined multiple goals, were the most successful. They felt natural, like the game wasn't pausing just to teach you a lesson.
Sweeping Vortigaunt. Another key moment of storytelling, and another nod to the physics system. Here, we're showing how Vortigaunts fit into this new world, which is a big shift from their Half-Life 1 role as enemies. Like so many moments in Train Station, The sweeping Vortigaunt came from our constant hunt for ways to show characters interacting naturally with the physics system. Why just tell players Vortigaunts are friendly now, when you can show one casually sweeping the floor and knocking around some simulated objects? Nothing signals, hey, don't shoot me this time around, like someone willing to tidy up.
I've been proud to call City 17 my home. And so, whether you are here to stay or
were you the only ones on that train?
On your way to parts unknown, welcome to City 17.
Overwatch stopped our train in the woods and took my husband for questioning. They said he'd be on the next train. I'm not sure when that was. They're being nice, though, letting me wait for him.
Citizens. When it came time to design the human citizens of City 17 and the world outside the city, we chose to include a variety of races, ages, and genders. This not only provided narrative context for the Combine's enslavement of all of humanity, but it was also important to us that anyone playing the game could see themselves represented in the Resistance, with everyone on Earth united against the Combine. While we found a number of candidates to use as reference in creating these citizens through our daily lives and connections, we ultimately resorted to advertising in the Seattle Times classifieds to reach the desired range of faces that we'd envisioned.
Proud to call City 17 my home. And so, whether you are here to stay or passing through on your way to parts unknown,
Natural storytelling. To achieve our world-building and storytelling goals throughout the train station, we needed a natural way to deliver dialogue without it feeling too gamey or requiring tutorials. We noticed players often approached NPCs to get a closer look, so we turned that into an opportunity for the NPCs to acknowledge the player and deliver their lines. This kept interactions low-key, which was essential since the citizens aren't exactly too cheerful or lively. The simplicity of this approach also aligned with one of Half-Life's core storytelling goals, making the narrative responsive to the player's interest. Some players want to dig into every detail, while others just want to know what to do next. Giving players control over how much story they want to engage with, without it blocking progress, is a goal we always try to maintain in a Half-Life game. Plus, the less complicated a feature is to implement, the more of it we can include.
and so, whether you are here to stay or passing through on your way to
Don't drink the water. They put something in it to make you forget.
City 17.
I don't even remember how I got here. Dr. Breen again? I was hoping I'd seen the last of him in City 14. I wouldn't say that too loud. This is his base of operations.
Early tech planning. Shipping a game always teaches us a lot. We finally get to find out which choices we made were good ones, and which were ones we should do differently next time. So after Half-Life 1, when we sat down to start thinking about what kind of sequel we could build, we had all kinds of player feedback to digest. From it, we tried to build a master list of things that Half-Life 2 was going to focus on. We didn't try to design a specific player experience. Instead, we found it more useful to approach the question from a technological standpoint. Black Mesa's security guards and scientists had worked well. What could we do if we pushed it really, really hard on characters? We liked our interactive storytelling. What could we build that would allow us to do even more of it, and a greater variety? The exploration and interaction with the Black Mesa was compelling to players. Maybe a physics system would allow us to take that further. In all these areas, we tried to imagine the best version of it could look like years in the future, and back solve from that a set of technological steps that might get us there.
You never see them go.
Welcome. Welcome to City 17. You have chosen or been chosen to relocate to one of
Storytelling.
the remaining urban centers.
Creating a sense of immersion was a core principle in our approach to Half-Life 1's storytelling, and it led us to the self-imposed constraints of never, or at least very rarely, taking control away from the player and of keeping the player's avatar silent. These limitations made storytelling more challenging at times, but we felt it was important to stay with them for Half-Life 2. Our hope was that by maintaining these principles, we'd push ourselves to explore deeper, more interactive storytelling.
Welcome to City 17.
This must be a mistake. I got a standard relocation coupon just like everybody else.
Characters. In Half-Life 1, security guards and scientists could best be described as archetypes, not individuals. They were abstractions of characters that matched the visual fidelity we could achieve at the time. But as our technology improved with Half-Life 2, we saw an opportunity to move beyond abstractions. The increased visual fidelity of the character models, combined with improvements in animation, made us believe we could focus on creating individual characters, people you would actually care about. We allowed ourselves to write real dialogue and have characters deliver it in a way that felt realistic enough for players to not think about them as pawns in a video game, and hopefully propel our narrative forward. In 2001, a couple of years into development, we were energized by Japan Studios' Ico. Directed by an animator, it blew us away with its reliance on characters as the key connection to the player, giving us the courage to keep pushing forward.
About that beer I owed you. It's me, Gordon, Barney from Black Mesa. Hey, sorry for the scare. I had to put on a show for the cameras. I've been working undercover with civil protection. I can't take too long or they'll get suspicious. I'm way behind on my beating quota.
Yes, Barney, what is it? I'm in the middle of a critical test.
Sorry, Doc, but look who's here.
Great Scott! Gordon Freeman! I expected more warning.
Yeah, you and me both, Doc. He was about to board the express to Nova Prospect.
Well, Barney, what do you intend?
I'm thinking.
Alex is around here somewhere. She would have a better idea how to get him here.
Well, as long as he stays away from checkpoints, we should be okay. Listen, I gotta go, Doc. We're taking enough chances as it is.
Very well. And, Gordon, good to see you.
Okay, Gordon. You're gonna have to make your own way to Dr. Kleiner's lab. Oh, man, that's what I was afraid of. Get in here, Gordon, before you blow my cover.
Blocking tutorials. At times, we need to be certain the player has learned something, and the standard method, at least in game development, not in life, is to trap them behind a gate of some kind, where the player must demonstrate their knowledge to be able to continue. We try to disguise these gates as something natural, so it doesn't feel like the game has come to a halt. Of course, time, resources, or the environmental context itself can make that tricky. In this case, we needed to teach the players how to move objects, so a simple stacking puzzles, blocking tutorials. At times, we need to be certain the player has learned something, and the standard method, at least in game development, not in life, is to trap them behind a gate of some kind, where the player must demonstrate their knowledge to be able to continue. We try to disguise these gates as something natural, so it doesn't feel like the game has come to a halt. Of course, time, resources, or the environmental context itself can make that tricky. In this case, we needed to teach the players how to move objects, so a simple stacking puzzle seemed like the best solution. We tested more complex designs, but they ended up being less effective at teaching the actual thing we needed the player to learn.
Blocking tutorials 2. There are two failures of note in this tutorial. First, players can break it by tossing all the boxes out the window, which is obviously not great. This leaves them stuck and unable to continue, which we consider a game-stopping bug that must be fixed. A clean solution would have been to tweak the window or crate sizes so that the player could fit through but not the crates. The problem was that we really only caught this problem late in development, and making even a simple change like that can have unpredictable, game-breaking consequences, and right before launch no less. Also, this issue was purely theoretical. We'd never actually seen players do it. Our playtests of the design space had gone smoothly, with players learning what they needed and moving on. So changing the room's design this late in the game could have disrupted that success in ways that we couldn't foresee, so we opted for a more conservative fix rather than something elegant. If you're curious, try tossing all the boxes out the window and see what happens.
Blocking Tutorials 3. The second failure in this tutorial space is a case of misteaching, where we accidentally teach the players something we didn't intend. This can be hard to avoid without extensive playtesting, since the game is always teaching, even when it's not by design. We cover a more extreme example of this later in Train Station. Some cases of misteaching are critical to fix, like if the player learns the wrong way to use a weapon or interact with a common element of the game. But this one was more subtle. While teaching players to move objects, we also taught them to stack physics objects to escape a space. Normally that's fine, except we don't deploy that puzzle later in the game, and teaching something irrelevant just clutters up their mental toolkit and makes it harder to readily keep useful things in mind later on. Worse, stacking objects to escape the play space become a problem later on, something we had to actively prevent in multiple areas. With so many physics-based objects in the game, blocking this behavior without putting ceilings everywhere wasn't really an option. In the end, we hoped players wouldn't overthink this early lesson, and when playtests showed players getting stuck later on, we made sure not to remind them of it.
Fall damage. Teaching players how to do things is an essential thing for the game to do, but for them to make confident decisions, they also need to understand the more subtle rules. This small moment covers two of those. First, it shows how far the player can fall without taking damage. Second, it introduces a bit of the game's vocabulary, how the game will communicate with them. Players often worry about taking fall damage, but they also worry about taking a step that they can't take back. So here, a welcoming crate to land on signals that dropping down is safe and it's the way forward. And when the crate breaks, it reinforces the physics simulation, and is likely the first time players will see that larger objects can be broken apart.
Let me read a letter I recently received. Dear Dr. Breen, why has the Combine seen fit to suppress our reproductive cycle?
Pick up that can. Contextualizing tutorials, creating a story scenario in which they happen, lets us do more than just stop the game to teach players something. We get to add narrative value to the moment. Here, teaching the player how to throw objects is combined with a narrative setup that gives them a choice in how to respond. After watching the Metro cops casually abuse citizens, it felt right to put the player in a similar position next. If they had opinions on how the citizens should have reacted, now they get to express them. Playtesting showed most players either complied or refused the request to pick up the can, but some tried to avoid the confrontation entirely. Others would comply initially, then retaliate after feeling humiliated. By keeping the moment relatively constrained, in both terms of player actions and the space itself, we could generally react appropriately to whatever choice they made.
Is in our reach. This simple fact has far-reaching implications. It requires radical rethinking.
Playtesting. Playtesting is a core part of how we make games. We can never fully predict how players will respond or what they'll take away from what we've built. So we test to learn and hopefully improve. During a playtest, we don't guide or talk to the player, even if they're stuck, as it's extremely unlikely that we'll be sitting there next to the player once the game ships. Our goal is for testers to forget that they're playtesting altogether and play as if they're at home. Any interruptions risk skewing the data, so we only step in if there's a bug that's blocking progress, or more rarely, if their behavior is so confusing that we need to understand what they're thinking.
But inseparable from instinct is its dark twin, superstition.
Early in a Half-Life game, One of our goals is to make promises to the player, giving them a sense of what to expect later on. From movies to TV shows and books, all great entertainment does this in some way, and video games are no different. The promises in a Half-Life game can take different forms. Some are simple, like offering just a glimpse of something intriguing. Others are more layered, like the interactions with Metro cops. By putting the player in a powerless position against them, we set the stage for that future moment when they can finally get to retaliate.
The Citadel. We wanted the player's first view of City 17 to highlight the Citadel and its dominance over the city, representing the Combine's complete and total power over humanity. It also needed to serve as a clear goal. Even at the start, you can see where your journey ends. But despite its massive size, playtesters often missed it. A player's sense of depth and scale can be tricky on a computer monitor. If you've played any games in VR, you'll likely have noticed that scale feels more natural. Anyway, in this case, the Citadel's position above the player didn't help things either, which may be because FPS games train players to focus straight ahead or down at their feet. To improve the chances of players taking in the Citadel, we added birds flying towards the structure. A subtle trick we've found helps guide the player's view.
Ropes. One of the things we noticed in all of the reference images that we gathered for City 17 was that there were cables and wires everywhere, and that they were a large part of the high-frequency detail in view. We loved the look of these older European cities enmeshed in the haphazard web of modern life. We felt like we needed a solution for cables, ropes, and similar elements, and we wanted them to be dynamic. Our level designers were eager to create plug puzzles, and connecting a cord to each plug helped players better understand the mechanics. Early in production, we built a rope system and iterated on it throughout development. Under the hood, each rope is made of multiple segments stretched between the two endpoints, and they can move independently. Each segment acts like a spring and responds to forces in the game, such as a gentle wind or the passing of a Combine gunship overhead. When rendered, each segment is shown facing the camera and is bump mapped, which is crucial for giving the ropes a realistic, rounded appearance.
Thank you for writing. Concerned?
Playtesting Anecdote 1. One memorable playtest reminded us that we can never be certain what players are thinking or what lessons they've taken from their experience. This tester, after playing from the start and stuck trying to open a door, spent several minutes going back and forth between the game and the keyboard settings. When we asked what they were looking for, they said they were searching for the inventory controls, thinking they could use an item they'd picked up earlier to unlock the door. While we'd seen them collect and drop several physics objects, they'd misunderstood what was happening. The tester believed that pressing the use key while holding an object moved it into an inventory because the item dropped straight down. We knew it was just gravity, but their assumption wasn't crazy. Some adventure games of that era did slide items into an invisible inventory that way. We explained there was no inventory, and the playtest continued. Later, we considered whether we needed to address this, but since no other playtesters had the same confusion, and all of our potential solutions were more heavy-handed than necessary, we decided it was an outlier that was okay to remain unaddressed. It served as a good reminder, though, of how even the most subtle, overlooked details can mislead a player.
Our true enemy is instinct.
Exploration. After being herded through the train station by Metro cops, we wanted to give the player a chance to explore. This plaza offered several ways to interact with citizens, Metro cops, scanners, and the city infrastructure. We aimed for these interactions to continue building the world without needing explicit tutorials, and we refined them until they worked naturally, without any real training.
But inseparable from instinct is its dark twin, superstition. Instinct is inextricably bound to unreasoning impulses, and today we clearly see its true nature. Instinct has just become aware.
Strider. This simple moment is a promise that you'll encounter this enormous thing later in the game. Even an uncomplicated scene such as this really does require a lot of playtesting and iteration because of Half-Life's goal of not taking control away from the player. As you can imagine, it takes a lot of small tweaks to ensure that as many players as possible are looking at the right place at the right time here. The street layout and the Metrocop scene are all set to guide the player's gaze, perfectly framing the Strider when it appears.
Closed captions. During Half-Life 2 development, we were approached by folks interested in accessibility who encouraged us to go beyond the subtitle system we had built for Half-Life 1. They requested a full-featured closed captioning system to capture all game sounds, not just dialogue. This turned out to be a much tougher challenge than expected. Half-Life 2 produced a wide variety of sounds, and categorizing them for
Materials and shaders. Half-Life 2 came out in the midst of a significant shift in 3D graphics, where the industry moved from textures to materials and shaders. In Half-Life 1, every surface had a texture, essentially an image wrapped onto the polygons of the surface. But by Half-Life 2, just 5 years later, every surface had both a material and a shader. The shader was a lump of code that customized how the surface was rendered. The material defined properties for how the surface behaved physically and how it responded to gameplay features. It also held references to textures and other parameters for the shader to use for rendering. As a result, artists and designers had much more
reference maps. As our characters grew more lifelike between Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2, we wanted the game world to feel equally realistic. In Half-Life 1, the limitations of first-person games often made it easier to lean on stylized or abstracted environments. But with Half-Life 2, we set out to create a setting that felt grounded in reality, which meant focusing on a lot of small details we hadn't before. One of our main steps was creating reference maps to standardize how we'd map real-world proportions into the game. These maps established details like wall and door dimensions, doorknob heights, interior lighting, furniture scale, and the general scale of common objects. We created standardized textures for level designers, complete with scale and lighting.
Health and no HUD. The rooftop chase sequence posed a unique design challenge. We didn't want it to be a true gameplay obstacle, and our best case was for players to make it through on their first try. But we still wanted to create the sense of real danger, where players felt legitimately threatened if they didn't keep moving. The challenge was that without the HEV suit, players don't technically have a heads-up display or HUD, which means no way to show damage or remaining health. After some experimenting, we created a special health system for this section, using a red glow around the screen to indicate damage. Players reacted as we hoped, taking it as a sign to keep moving, and the chase unfolded as intended. To top it off, we made health regenerate quickly so the glow wouldn't linger, reinforcing to players that running was indeed the right choice, and ensuring players weren't taken down by a stray bullet at the end just because they dawdled or hesitated earlier on.
Playtesting Anecdote 2. In the upcoming section, we needed the player to be knocked down so
No, you don't! Dr. Freeman, I presume. I better hurry. The Combine can be slow to wake, but once they're up, you don't want to get in their way. Dr. Kleiner said you'd be coming this way. I don't think it occurred to him that you might not have a map. I'm Alex Vance. My father worked with you back in Black Mesa. I'm sure you don't remember me, though. Man, a few words, aren't you? Remember him from Black Mesa? Your